What's up for today? So last week, we had demos from Jean-Thierry about distributed services, and he showed us how to set up multiple hosts for Orchard and how Redis was coordinating everything. Then Dean showed us the media profiles, so you can name a set of filters, predefined filters from ImageSharp, and then use them by name, and also add custom ones. So it's pretty useful. So today, demos.
Yeah, not really a demo, but a discussion if we can have about branding, logos, and such.
Branding. Sipke, Blazor stuff. Topics, branding. What else? Benedek. Ship 1.11.
I was going to say that. 2022 maybe.
We'll see.
No, earlier than that.
I can demo the 4 modules if you want.
Oh yes, I forgot about you, Jean-Philippe, sorry. Forms, VueForms. Well, how do you call that? Forms.
Yeah, it's called the VueForms.
StatCan. Okay, so I'll be quick then. Great. And the recording. Sure. And Dean is not joining us today. That's why we have so many demos.
Yeah.
Because he's not there. What?
VueForms.
I didn't hear you. So much noise.
Vue.
Yes, because Vue.js. I don't know why. Sorry. Vue.js. For French, I'm kind of ashamed. I will let Antoine handle that. Thank you. And status first. Orchard 1, some PRs and some work from Matteo and Hermes. So this has been updated since last week. We had dev branch prevent non-referenced exceptions. We saw that, I think. We saw that too. This is a PR, and this has been merged on 110x, fixed record mapping and hibernate. There was a field that was correctly created in database with the unlimited size, but the mapping was not defined. So it will still cut some text or send errors for when the state is too big. So just updating this field. And allow downstream methods to set default values. I think it's related to the change to the new custom Boolean binder provider, and then apparently issue with default values, so fixed also. Orchard Core updates 22nd. This one, ShellScope usage, so fixing the way ShellScope is used. Explain that there will be some issues between tenants. Which was Jean-Thierry on that. Password visibility. So that's where I think we saw that. We talked about it last week, 22nd. But I see the date. What time is that? Is it UTC? Maybe. -7. What does it mean, -7? For me or? Whatever. So adding a little icon to be able to hide the password. And I noticed that it's actually missing in the change password screen in the admin. So if you create a new user and you want to set the password, then you don't have that. Just mentioning, because I know you did that on the setup and on the login screen. Fix VS Code tasks. So only start HTTP, settings, nothing, tasks. Okay. We trust you. Admin UI content list, always remove non-listable content types. Can you hear singing? Or is it just me?
There's no background noise for me, if that's what you mean.
Good. Good. I was about to tell them to to be more quiet, but that's okay then if you don't hear them. Okay, listable, non-listable content types not displayed. I think there was a PR to fix that, so it's not complete. Display menu title on icon in admin. Display menu title on icon in admin or a tooltip.
So when it's collapsed, you can see a tooltip of the menu above the icon.
Okay. ImageSharp.Web RTM with the perf improvements and the new option to define the quality of the image if you want to set it on the command. Is that also the profile or not? Lots of files changed here. Just reacting to the new version, apparently. And with the quality stuff, okay. Well, you can set the quality and the format, okay. Yeah, so here you can set, there is a new parameter on the quality you can set. And let's look at the documentation updates. If I double click, what happens? No doc on that. Format, no doc on that. So sad, or maybe there is another file. No, but there's a quality and the format. So you can define what format you want to generate. Even if so when you serve a PNG file, for instance, and you say format JPEG, the file name will still be PNG, but the content will be a JPEG, and the browser will read it as a JPEG. That's the idea. Admin UI, return URL missing. Okay. What's the text of this link? New content type. Okay. Skip focus on icon buttons in login and setup form. So due to the new icon you added, that you can switch the visibility of the password, you don't want it to be focused by default. Or even focusable, I assume, right? So you step through that, you don't step over. Well, HttpContext null check. Okay, so this guy can be null. Fix OpenIdApplicationStep to honor. I said yes, this one was filed last week and fixed really quick. Oh, maybe a wrong copy paste. So this property was not taken into account when executing recipe. I use Assets.json in preview and template modules. Assets.json in preview and templates. So this one, content preview. Edit. Okay, so this way they will be minimized. So moving the file to the assets folder, I assume. And then we have that generated. Okay, using the, okay. Oh, and it's also updating the resources. Okay. Setup cleanup code. HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Hide content type filter when using admin menu content type feature. Hide content type filter when using admin menus content type feature. Okay, so related to menus and listing content types. Because we use the admin, the content item admin screen to list the menu items, to list the menus, sorry. Remove manage own permission, manage own media permission, because it's not handled today, and we can replace with manage media. So deleting the permission which is not used. Update to mkdocs. Big update. So what's new with that, with this big update?
The scripts are shorter.
Nothing visible.
No, but I had to change the way the navigation tabs feature was configured. So now it's working.
Okay. Upgrade Fluid.Core to the latest, which contains the new filters for formatting, numbers, dates, and strings, and probably some fixes also. Update to Lucene, so perf improvements mostly, and also refactoring, but we just care about the perf improvements. Use dropdown menu on admin top navbar for user menu. That's new. Is it? So did you share a screenshot on the issue?
Yes, you did.
Okay, let's look at it. One was merged because earlier I could see so closed September 28th, Jasmin. Where is that?
5588, it's a node one.
Should I look recently here? What is that?
The top comment has been changed.
Okay, good. Boom. So how was it before? Before it was this?
No, it's the change.
This is just your dark theme and the non-dark theme.
It was two links, I guess, before.
I see. So two links, and is it
It's changing for yeah, drop down menu instead of having it like inline, because someone could want to customize this menu.
So I'm wondering here, this is a drop down and the text is a little shadow and admin text. Should it be just the shadow and later we can change to the user's gravatar, like Sipke knows how to do? And or should it be something else, like anything generic? Well, I assume it can be anything, it's static. But so then is the list
it's just
drop down?
It's just a button, so yeah, you could add a gravatar instead of the icon.
And then disabled, so this is not that. Features, user menu.
Yeah, because originally the task was to use a hamburger menu for doing this, and Dean just commented and said this is a user menu, so it should just be something for the user. And this is why I used this button, and I added an example of a team that used the same kind of thing on the last comment to show that they use like
name also.
Yeah, and instead of having hamburger menu, they use a sidebar menu there, which makes sense because we don't really need a hamburger menu to show just one option, which is the logout.
So we need this to be a shape, a zone, so people can add custom links there.
Yeah.
So if it's just, or at least, and it doesn't have to be complex. It's just a layout zone. Is it a layout zone? That can be a layout zone, but it needs to be a zone somehow that probably a layout zone that any custom module can inject a link there. I assume that might be nice.
Yeah, first part was to style it, so this is what I did.
Thank you. Document release procedure. So this has merged. Awesome. Add option to allow Lucene query syntax in search. We talked about it a few weeks ago, and there was a PR I think we reviewed. So the idea is that now there is a setting in the Lucene module that you can check, and whatever you type in the search box won't be parsed as these are words I need to search, but parsed as this is a Lucene query. So you can use the Lucene ors, ands, and double quotes and plus, things like this. Okay, but by default, it will still be like today, which is type words, and it will look for these words. And if you type stuff that has weird chars, they will be ignored. Remove Autoroute entries only if there is no published version. This is to prevent the fact that if you might, I think, unpublish something, the Autoroute would be removed also, no, because there might be an older version, or remove a draft. Maybe that's the opposite. Remove the draft, then the published version will still be kept for the Autoroute. So it's fixing a bug. Update mkdocs material and doc navigation features. Okay, I should also to react to the updated mkdocs. Good, questions? No questions. So what do? We will start with Jean-Philippe, because he was first to say he wanted to demo stuff on Thursday. Jean-Philippe.
Okay, I'm almost ready there. Okay, so let me just share my screen.
Jean-Philippe doesn't like the forms module as it is right now by default. And some other people have mentioned that there are some limitations they don't like for whatever reason. And you wrote a different one.
Yeah, so it was mostly to handle the request with JavaScript, so Ajaxify them. So initially I went the route with Bootstrap and the built-in .NET unobtrusive validation. But midway, I decided to try out the Vuetify, Vue.js, and vValidate, which are 3 client-side libraries. And they worked really well. So right now the module is kind of like in the early days, so there's still a lot of code to be written on the admin side, but at least it works and we can start playing around with the forms to see what's possible and what's not possible.
Can you zoom in?
Sorry?
Can you zoom the screen?
Control zoom.
Yeah, that's what I also wanted to ask. You can just share your window.
No.
I'll show the window. Yeah, I have a wide monitor. So wait, okay, let's share window. This one. Is this better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
It's there, yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's get into it. So this module basically creates a content type called VueForm and allows you to create what I call VueForms. And the difference between the forms modules and this is that it's like using client-side validation. It's integrated with Vue.js, vValidate, and Vuetify, as I mentioned earlier. So for this demo, I ran the blog setup recipe and set up the module. So build the contact form. This is what it looks like here. So I added it in the layer. I'll show how just in a second. So, okay, go back to it. So I'll show you how it works. So title, this is just for the admin, the form enabled or disabled. If it's disabled, you can show this text. This was just to allow us to like create the form in the back and no one can access it in the front end. A success message. So when the form is successful, the server-side validation pass, you'll get this message, or if it doesn't, you can display this message. There's a client init script. So this is actually client-side JavaScript where you can set up options for vValidate, Vue, or Vuetify, as you can see here. So you can set client-side options here. So this was to give flexibility to see what would be required. In this case, we use it to localize the vValidate fields validations. So as you can see here, the required message is coming from our localize liquid filter. The on validation is a server-side script. So this is using Gint or the server-side, the Autoroute scripting, where you can see you can get the form data, and then you can perform client-side validation here. So this is what I meant by it's not complete yet. So my end goal is to have widgets, and the validation would be defined inside the widgets, so we wouldn't have to duplicate it here. And the widget would generate the client-side and server-side validation together. So right now it's kind of like early days, so I still require on validation for server-side validation. I added this method that allows you to add the error, and it's going to be mapped to the input on the client side. On submitted, this is where you would like perform actions after validation. So let's say validation passes, there's no errors added, then this script gets called. So this is where I typically would create a content item or perform something. You can even do a redirect. So this is a little global method I wrote as well. Yeah, so that's how it works. For localization, I built this part. I'm not too sure about it yet, but this basically puts all the text inside of one content item. So since I didn't want to duplicate these scripts across two items by using the localization part, I decided to create this little helper that allows you to create key and culture pairs. So basically, like you can add as many as you want, and you can reference them in a script like this. So you get the localized text for the current culture. So localized text.name required error will be for the current culture, current request culture, sorry. And in Liquid, you can also reference it like this. Yeah, so that's what these are for. Since we didn't have a lot of languages, this made sense for us, but I'm not sure it would make sense for a site that has like many languages. It might become a bit bloated, but for us, it worked. And then you can see here, there's a view component widget, which is the one that I initially built as a proof of concept, but it works pretty well. So it's basically code. So you're writing it's a Vue.js component. So you have a template and you also have a script. So the script is a typical Vue.js component script. For this case, I just needed the data, but you can have computed fields, etc. The template is here, and as you can see, we're using the validation provider, and this is how you specify it. Like you map the errors here with the view slots. The rules here, I removed it. Actually, initially it was required, and this was like email as well, but I removed it just to show the server-side validation. This has Liquid support, so it's kind of weird because Vue.js uses double squigglies for a mustache syntax, I guess, for templated strings, and we use Liquid server-side to display the labels. So when you want to actually display the Vue.js, you need to use the raw block. So this will be client-side success message and client-side error message. We have a bit of documentation as well, so you can see this is actually injected by the top-level Vue app component, if you will, and it resolves to these two. So we have documentation as to what's available. Another one is form handle submit is available, and there's also, you can write something like disabled equals form submitting. So this will be set to true when the form is currently submitting and set to false if there's a successor error handled in the Ajax call. We also, so I'll just publish this guy, and we also have a workflow integration. So as you can see here, I was testing earlier. So I created an event. It's when the form is submitted, and you can select which form. So you can have one workflow for many forms. So if you had multiple forms, they would show up here and you can check them off. And this allows you to, for example, send an email or do more advanced stuff. What I found though is that in most cases, or some of the cases where I didn't want to have a workflow, the script was enough for like a lot of use cases that I have. So I was okay with just using this to create a content item. And yeah, so this form, I displayed it in the widgets right here. So I added a widget. This widget has a content picker that allows us to pick that form and is displayed always. So if you go to the home page of the blog, you'll see at the bottom that your form is here. So if you try to send, you see the client-side validation is triggered. So I'll just put something invalid here. So John, and then this is a message. And I'm going to send it to the server side. And this is the server side validation. And as you can see, this message is coming from the definitions that we had in the form here, up here. Please correct the errors above, and it's displayed like this. Okay, so I'm just gonna fix it, GP, whatever. and send it. Okay, so your contact request was successfully received. So if you remember here, we're creating a content item. So I'm just going to go double check that it's actually created. So you can see contact request is there. There we go. So the contact request is there. And we were also sending an email. So I'm going to go just check to see if it got put into my email. So it's right here. Whoops, I'm just going to open this with Notepad just to show. So the email, the message is there. That all works. You can also make a redirect like this. So you could technically do an HTTP redirect here, or you can also do it in the submitted as I shown earlier. I think that's it. So if I just send this again, yeah, see now the redirect happened from the workflow. And you can also do it from the, whoops, I was right there. Sorry, from here as well. So since we're creating content item, you can also redirect to the content item with its ID. So I'm going to do this. I might have to go and undo the one in the workflow because it happens after. There we go. And again, okay. There you go. So this is displaying the content item. Yeah, so like I mentioned before, right now it's a bit verbose as to what you have to write in here, but my goal is to use this and kind of like get a feel for how we use it and what's required as what requirements are we getting back from our users, and then we will like make widgets out of the fields, for example, and automatically map the validation like this. Like the validations here and your error message on the client side, etc.
Yeah, that's my first thought. Why isn't it a set of custom widgets for the current forms module?
For the current forms module, it's all about the client-side validation and server-side validation, and allowing a script.
Okay,
on validation on submitted.
It's funny because everything we are seeing here is just made by Sitka. Forms module, the workflows. So what is the forms module? The forms module is just what is just. It's what is the forms module based on? The flow part.
Yeah.
With the form content type. So today we have a form content type and other kinds of widgets, form widgets, that work with the current form content type. But what if you just have but you're not doing the same thing here. You have a view forms. Well, you have the same thing, right? You can put some custom widgets inside. I saw that.
Yeah, right here.
So this is also a form, a flow. Sorry.
Yep, the same thing.
Okay.
It's a flow. The only difference is that it injects, it handles the JavaScript, the client-side validation.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, so these could also be custom widgets or custom properties of a form widget.
It could be. Yeah, you could.
So what would be interesting would be to have different sets of form widgets then. Like the one we have today, which is completely server-side for simple usage, and maybe there is a view set of form components, and and you could still have everything in terms of widget, but you said that's what you want to go to, like have each element as a different widget, and you can configure them with custom Vue.js or custom JavaScript properties and non-intrusive validation and so on. So yeah.
So basically, this is all doable with the forms modules, like an enhancement on top. But the big thing for me was to have it separate. So the view forms are all here, and you reference them via the widget there that I showed earlier. Because there was a lot of cases where we wanted to have multiple, display the same form in multiple places. And that was a bit harder with the built-in one, since it was a widget. And with localization as well, when you had the localization part, you had a duplicate of the forms, whereas this is just one. So
yeah,
I don't know,
think
there was...
component could handle that this way also. You don't have to use the full localization for that once we have the dynamic, because what you are implementing is the beginning of the dynamic localization that we have designed, and Isham already started to work on.
Yeah. Like this part
Okay,
here.
cool. That's cool. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. This part should be the dynamic localization thing. Okay, thanks. I need to put some time for Sipke and Zoltan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Sipke, your turn.
All right, so I have Blazor forms. No, I'm kidding.
And I will interrupt you a lot because I will ask questions. I want to understand what's happening.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, that's good. I also started with a blog recipe, just just as a starting point. But yeah, let me summarize what I'm about to show, which is well, I've been working on a Blazor application for a personal project. But for those of you who have experience with Blazor, it's static, of course. So you define components, but the contents that you show, you would have to fetch it from your server using Ajax, for example. But what I really wanted to be able to use is use an existing backend. So in this case, Orchard-Core. But I also wanted to be able to leverage the flexible design system so that I can use the composable content type system of Orchard and render it client-side without having to create a separate component for each and every content type. So I started a little experiment, and I will show you each part of it. And the first part of that I think is interesting is this menu. So as you can see, this is based on the standard Blazor project template. But what's different here is that this menu comes from the server. And for your information, this is a WebAssembly Blazor application, but it also works with server-side Blazor, which is easier in terms of debugging. But it doesn't matter which mode hosting model you choose. But yeah, let me show you this menu, which is managed here. So I can, for example, change the order of the menu items and then publish this. And I notice I moved the about menu item. And if I refresh this, it's also now in this location. And
so the template you mentioned, did you put it in your web project? Is it a module?
Yeah, so I'm using Orchard-Core as a fully headless CMS, not a decoupled CMS, but headless, which means it's Orchard is a separate instance, a separate application, and the Blazor application is also, it's a separate solution, so it would be hosted separately. It would be served from a separate container, for example. And this is the structure basically.
Too small.
Too small.
Control plus, does it work in Rider? Can you zoom everything? Okay, that's there.
Yeah. So the structure is as follows. So here we have the application, and this is shared by both the Blazor client host and the Blazor server host, which are just shells, really referencing the meat of the application itself, which contains the app Razor component. And this is fairly basic, with the exception that this is set up in a modular way, which means that as part of the library that I'm building, it contains a bunch of modules. But we'll get to that in a second. I first want to show the menu, which is here. So the nav menu component that comes with the default Blazor template. But what I'm doing here is I'm using my own orchard core. Well, it's not orchard core. It's like I call it Blazing Orchard. That's the project name, which is its own component coming from a library. And what this thing does, it uses another component, which is what I call content item view, which under the covers fetches data from Orchard using a HTTP client. And what's interesting is it's reusable, which means you can use this also, for example, here in my content page, which has a wildcard match, which means it will match any URL that's not defined here as part of the Blazor application. And then I use this as a handle into the content item view so that it will be able to load any content item from Orchard. But what's interesting is that what it gets back from Orchard is just a JSON object, but I'm using the same concepts, the same mechanisms as Orchard Core to render this content item into components. So not using, using shapes as the intermediate layer, because, if you're familiar with shapes, you know it's very flexible. I'm using the exact same system here, but instead of rendering it to Razor views, I'm rendering it to Razor components. So what you'll see is if you look at the URL here being changed, this all comes from the Orchard CMS. Excuse me. I haven't implemented all parts, such as the list item part hasn't been implemented, but it's a start. And what I think is really interesting is that, for example, if you look at this counter component that comes with the default Blazor template, you can actually use Liquid to render a shape that gets rendered as this component. So for example, this counter button is the component I just was clicking on. Now, if I go to the backend and I go to this counter Liquid page, this is just Liquid, but notice that I'm using the shape new filter to create a counter button shape, which I then render. And it's not just rendered as a string, it's actually rendering as a fully functioning component. And if you look at the component, for example, I'm exposing a public property as a parameter. So I can do things like in this way, I can use the CMS to configure not these components, but also, of course, position them anywhere I like. So I can,
sorry to interrupt. Can you zoom globally your editor, because we already can't see that? So this screen is fine, but the editor is already unreadable.
Yes,
can you do it once?
Yeah. So let me change the display settings. But I will have to restart sharing probably. We will see. Can you still see my screen, or is it very broken now?
Yeah, no, we can still see it, and it's better.
Okay, good.
Then I want to understand what happened. So here it's a Razor component.
This
with
is a
default of click me button text.
Correct. Yes. So what I did here in this Liquid thing, I'm rendering a shape, and this is
shape new. So you are creating a current button shape, and you are changing the property button text to click me. So you have a new shape of type counter button with a property button text click me, and you say shape render, and it will render. So what's the template for this one? Counter button. Where is the template for counter button?
So this component, it represents the template of that shape. So
but it's what I'm saying is that I want to understand how it works. So on the server side, I see, well, so on the server side, there is a Liquid page.
Yes.
The Liquid page says render a counter button shape.
Yes, but this, for your information, this Liquid template is rendered client side. So it's rendered within the Blazor application.
Client side.
Client side, indeed, yes. So client side.
Because you copied some code. Okay, because it's WASM, so you copied some C# code from Orchard to do that.
Dude, I copied a lot of code from Orchard Core into Blazor.
Okay.
So it has things like.
That explains. So it's really running on. So you are loading the liquid page content item as
Exactly.
is. You're not trying to execute it. It's just, oh, give me the liquid page. And because it's a liquid page, you said so the WASM is actually executing the liquid page shape.
Exactly. So it's indeed, so the liquid page is a content item which has a liquid part which is rendered client side using a driver. So we're here. So there's a liquid part display which creates a liquid part shape. Does a bunch of interesting things. So this is the magic that makes it actually work to be rendered as a component using a render tree writer. In any case, so it uses the Fluid library to parse the liquid syntax, and then I'm passing in my own text writer to intercept those statements that are being emitted, and so that I can actually render it to the render tree builder, which is a Blazor API. So that's what's going on here. And of course, another interesting part is how does the shape get rendered into a component, and that's what the shape renderer does. So here's the shape renderer. And what it does, it gets a shape table so that it can find all of the, well, it's basically a big dictionary between component type names, or actually shape names and shape alternates, and they are then this method tries to map it to the correct, most appropriate component type. And the default convention is that the component type name, if that matches shape name, then that component will be used to render, but you will be able to specify more specific components using shape alternates, which I will show you in a second. But
so
that's
you're instantiating a Razor component from the shape instance.
Yes,
and you
exactly.
map the properties of the shape to the Razor component.
Exactly, that's what happens here. So here, when I render a component, I'm getting a component type to instantiate the shape that's supposed to, that represents the model of the component. And here I'm getting all of the public properties of the shape. And then I'm trying to see if this component has a property with the same name that's also marked with a parameter attribute. If that's the case, I select the shape property, and then this is the list of public properties on my shape that I can safely assign to the component. So this is manually building the components using the render tree builder, and that of course gets then rendered by Blazor. And it works pretty nice. So as you saw, it works for the counter button, but because of the shape system, I can also do things like here I have content parts. So I have a component called special block title part, which does nothing at this moment because I'm not explicitly rendering it anywhere, but I can associate it with a shape. So in this case, I can associate it with a shape alternate for the block content type. So whenever the title part is being rendered, the shape also gets an alternate using the content type. So here I'm taking advantage of that to customize the rendering of the block content item. So this title part here will be changed if I restart the application.
So do you need shapes because Razor components can't change their templates dynamically?
I don't know if that's the case, but the reason I went with shapes is that I wanted to have a similar experience to what we use with Orchard Core when you theme an application. So
Bad.
What's that?
It's bad.
No, it's one of the best things for Orchard. Is the shape system.
That's good when you are like 200 IQ like you, but not everyone is like you, so it's hard.
I maybe, but I also made it easy. So for example, so you saw that this has changed now, but I also made it easy, for example, to because I understand that it can be very complicated to figure out what shapes are emitted and what templates to use for that. But you can also, if you're writing a Blazor application and you just want to take over rendering of some part or even a content type like the article content type, you can just take over. Of course, you need to understand this shape type here, so there's no way around that. Maybe we can simplify it by skipping shapes or using some default convention. That would work.
Last weeks, I've been trying to find ways to not use shapes at all.
Oh, really?
That's what I'm saying. And if you watch the meetings, you will see, because we talk about what will happen if we didn't have shapes on the front end, not back end, because we need shapes for the back end, but for the front end at least. And also trying to find, so Dean also worked on a way to create components with shapes. And then we looked at Razor components, but we didn't look at it during a Tuesday meeting, but during a Thursday one, so it was less visible. So we looked at Razor components, and what was missing from the Razor components in 3.1, which will be fixed in 5.0 actually. So I think there are other ways, and I will show you some stuff, and we'll talk maybe offline about it. The issue with shapes is not shapes; it's the fact that nobody understands how it works, and then it looks like magic, and people are lost. That's the issue. So that's why I'm wondering if there is no other way to do that, what you're doing without shapes, or what you try to get from shapes, and if we can't just get that from shapes without having to take the full baggage.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That would be interesting, and I think that will be possible. But yeah, my default thinking was shapes. Also, in Orchard, we have Liquid, which has shape helpers. But of course, it's also easy to create a customized Liquid filter that directly maps to a component. And that way we can then render the component, provide attributes or properties to that component. Yeah, so that will be interesting to discuss further offline. That's the reason I went with shapes. It was my default option.
A few weeks ago, however, we had a demo from William about Razor, and he asked about support for Blazor in HttpContext. And what I said was what we needed was a set of Blazor components that will connect directly to HttpContext to render the content from HttpContext. And I gave the example of a company who made that for Xamarin Forms at that time to build mobile applications that will render articles directly from the content in Orchard. And that's what you did. You have your content item component and your menu component. And I think that's great. So you said you were using GraphQL or the REST APIs to connect to the data?
That's a very good point. I wanted to use that initially, but there are some limitations, not to GraphQL, but in order to get the content definition, the content schema, that wasn't exposed, or at least I couldn't find it. So what I did is I created a server-side module, an Orchard Core module that exposes a couple of endpoints, one to get content items. Also, this prevents app use, because by default, if you wanted to be able to use the items controller or one of those API endpoints, you have to allow anonymous access. But the API controller also allows, I believe, some updates. But of course, I only want read access in this case. So I created my own endpoint to get a content item by a handle, and also to get content types, so that I can use that on the client side, so that I have the necessary metadata to create the various shapes. But of course, this is just a module. will be integrated into Orchard if it's interesting, but it's also very easy to just add it to your own project. So this is an Orchard Core project, or actually it's just an ASP.NET Core project that references Orchard CMS.
So in your content item component, is there a Razor fragment that I can change the body of the content item?
Can you repeat that question?
So in your content item component, can you open the component? Okay. Let me check the parameters. So, you know, there is a Razor fragment type that you can use in a component.
Yes. Oh, yes. No, it's not a templated component. It's not. It could be, though.
Should.
Why?
Well, this way, when you create a page, you can say, inject my about page here, and this is the way I want to display it with the properties or whatever.
Ah, but just to make sure I understand, so the way it works right now is that this content item view accepts a content item that it will render. Actually, it will fetch it by handle. So you specify the content handle as a parameter. And then if it's specified, then it will fetch it from the API, from Orchard. And then if it receives it, then it will build a shape for it. Yeah, and that shape will be rendered using a shape view.
And then you need to be able to render a content item. So it's Orchard, but on the client. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And with shapes, shapes themselves are, can have child shapes. I didn't implement zones yet, but at this point I didn't need it. But the setup, since it's a big copy of Orchard Core, it's easy to add a zone holding behavior and that sort of thing. And then you get the ability to inject other shapes into that. But yeah, maybe there's a more modern or clever way with by using components, because as you say, Blaze components support render fragments so that you can template them that way.
Okay. Is that all your demo?
Pretty much, yeah. You got the gist of it. So all of these things are various types of content items. So this is markdown that gets rendered. This is written article that I wanted to show, and functional components. Yes, so this is my demo.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's interesting to see how you can run some part of Orchard inside WASM, and
it really blew my mind that to just be able to run all of those things on the client. So basically pushing down server-side rendering of contents all the way to the client side.
Mm. Cool. Thanks a lot. Optimal deviation, intriguing, because yeah, trying to understand how it works, how everything works. And now you have shapes. Oh my God. So, Zoltan.
Shouldn't we do it next week?
If you want, you tell us. If we need more time and you can do it next week, then we will do it first next week.
Well, let's do a very quick kickoff. Now that we are all here, so some of you probably have seen my my issue on the issue tracker about branding. So let me also link to it. Updating the Orchard branding. So we are talking about all the graphics pretty much as a first step, and as later steps, probably also gather our thoughts on what Orchard is and how we want to communicate about Orchard. So what should be on the website? Probably you remember that a while ago, we actually had discussions about this with Orchard 1, but then these never really went anywhere. So what we would like to do now is to start a discussion and with the help of Elevate. Elevate is a brand strategy and design firm from Hungary. We have worked with them a lot actually in the last 2 years on business development and smaller graphic design projects. So Paris is from there. So Paris, if you like, just very, very quickly, a little bit of introduction about you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Because my mic is tricking me today all day. Cool. Yeah. So my name is Paris Noble. I live in Hungary, outside of Budapest, and I am co-founder of a small strategic design firm called Elevate Strategy and Design. And like Zoli said, we've been working with Lombiq for quite a while now, about 2 years. But our main focus is brand strategy and visual design, and we've been doing this for just over 2 years now. And our biggest job now is we actually won a tender on rebranding the whole of Budapest. So we're just doing an official city rebranding. We've been doing a few scientific conferences as well, and a few tech companies as well. So, and a few weeks ago, Zoli raised the question to us if we'd be interested in rebranding Orchard. So we had a brief discussion about that. I wrote on the article about the basics of branding and how we approach branding and visual identities. And we had another brief talk today that at the moment we'd probably just start doing the Orchard logo and creating a brand kit for everyone, for you to use freely. So that's where this discussion is at the moment, and we can take it from here.
Yeah, really, what I've seen is that we don't really have proper logos for Orchard. So I wanted to use an Orchard logo in a presentation, and if you want to get the logo, you have to fish it out from somewhere. At one point in the Orchard One documentation site, there was a page about the branding assets. Actually, I recreated that a while ago in the Orchard core documentation. But those files are really outdated, inconsistent. So we are also using Orchard's logos inconsistently all over the place. The first step would be to fix that. So that's more like a technical step. Probably a little bit of update, but I wouldn't do anything radical since it's already introduced. We all like it, I presume. You know the basic motifs. And then, as later steps, we can address the harder questions if there is interest in that.
The what question? Which question?
The harder questions, like how to communicate about Orchard.
Okay. So I assume we just comment on this issue then in the meantime.
Yeah. This would probably be better than better as a discussion, but at that time we didn't have discussions yet. But yeah, please review the ideas and the discussions, and then we can ask Paris and his team to actually implement.
Can someone find? I remember there was a PDF. I don't know who worked on that for Orchard One. Who was involved with that? There was a PDF where we should find the issue in the Orchard One repository where we talked about that, find the PDFs, and also find all the assets. So you made a PR, but I don't know where it is on the docs with the old assets we had. So if we can just add them in this issue to have pointers to what we have already and just to drive the conversation. But okay, thank you for driving this and for suggesting stuff to make progress. I see here rebrand and rename it. I need to read that. I didn't read it. I just saw the title, and I thought it was just about getting the assets that we had already. So I will read more. It's an old issue.
Yeah, I actually wrote quite a long comment, which might be a bit off topic regarding the scope of the work. So at the moment, we're just thinking about doing some small steps, some facelifts, basically. But I think we should really start a discussion on it and what you guys think, any ideas, how to proceed, because I think the best work is always through heavy discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Good. Questions, comments about anything during today's meeting? Forms, Blazor, branding. Awesome. And we are way over the time limit. Thanks, everyone. See you on Thursday for the triage or next Tuesday for next meeting. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.